Welcome to the debut episode of Drafters TV presented by Drafters Fantasy Sports. My name is Ben Hauver. I am the host of this show. If you're unaware, Drafters is the premier site for best ball drafting. You can download the app for free on iOS or Android, where you will find best ball drafts for as low as $1.11 all the way up to the 109s for the big ballers. New leagues are starting all the time, so get in there and get drafting. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by a very special guest to discuss the quarterback position in best ball, how to handle it, and how my rankings differ from Drafters ADP, all while giving the viewers out there some insight on how to profit off of these market inefficiencies. This is part one of a four-part series. We'll have individual episodes for each of the four draftable fantasy positions. Those will be coming out over the next couple of days, so make sure you mash that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and don't miss out on a single piece of content. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show someone who is known for many things. Someone who took the term must follow to a whole new level in the DFS Twitter sphere. The man, the myth, the legend. Of course, I'm talking about Peter Overzet. Peter, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Ben. I'm excited to do this with you. Do we have an official name for this show yet, or are we going to figure that out as we go?
Yeah, I think we're just going to work under the umbrella of Drafters TV and just see where it goes from there.
Nice, dude. Yeah, so I've been doing some of the best ball drafts on Drafters on my Friday night streams, and I've been letting a randomizer kind of dictate my strategy, and so my brain is a little warped from that, so I'm excited to actually talk what you do when you're trying to win and not just goof around on the internet.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really excited to get into this quarterback talk. We're going to take a look at and debate my top 32 ranked quarterbacks in a moment here, but first, I've got 5 questions for you, questions mostly having to do with the quarterback position and sort of in broad strokes how to attack the position as a whole. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's start off with something simple. Question 1, there's really 2 ways you can look at the quarterback position in best ball, and it's either going to be to draft 2 of them or to draft 3 of them. So which way do you lean? Are you a 2 quarterback drafter or are you a 3 quarterback drafter in best ball?
I think traditionally I'm a 3 quarterback drafter. The guys at RotoViz have done some good studies on this, and that's one of the bigger inefficiencies is people not drafting high upside quarterbacks and not drafting enough of them. So I like getting that 3rd quarterback. I do think the exception would be if you reach on a Mahomes or a Lamar, then I think it's best to use that other slot on another position later in the draft. But if I'm waiting till, say, round 7 or later, I'm hoping to get 3 of them.
Okay, all right. That's good. Question 2 here, and this is a little bit more of a personal question, but I'm genuinely curious. What does it feel like to be the walking epitome of clout? We've all witnessed it. You strapped up your boots, you marched to the tippy top of the mountain that is DFS Twitter, and you chiseled your face on the side of it like the Mount Rushmore of touts. So what does it feel like? Is it like basking in glory and self-satisfaction, or is it maybe a little bit darker? Is the celebrity of it crushing, Peter? I really
Wow,
don't know.
This just turned into like a Mark Maron interview where you're just trying to get to the bottom of my stuff. Well, I don't consider myself a tout, and I guess it depends what the definition of clout is. But yeah, it's been a fun season these past few months, or I should say like 7 or 8 months. We've had a lot to play around with. The counselor, we had Patrick Laird, we had the DraftKings gate, double lineup controversy. So I don't know. I just, as stuff comes along, I like to have fun with it. And just try not to do everything that everyone else is doing because, there's a lot of people, going about things the same way. So I'm not even capable of doing things that way. So I just march to the beat of my own drum and I'll let the cookie crumble how it may.
All right. Okay. All right. A little bit back to football. Question 3. Would you consider yourself to be a follower of the late round quarterback theory? The general idea that quarterback production is on a week-to-week basis, and therefore waiting on quarterback is almost always the smart move on draft day, or the outliers in recent years, guys like Mahomes and guys like Jackson, sort of change the way you approach that?
Yeah, I definitely have I'm still a late round quarterback believer, but I've actually changed the way I think about it. I initially thought of it of like, okay, all of these guys, their production's pretty flat. It's replaceable. You can wait as long as possible. And I still kind of think that, but I now am tweaking it a bit to where I want to be attacking the highest upside, mid to late round quarterbacks, because it's basically for the same exact reason. It is so flat, so if I take a big swing on Kyler Murray like I did last year, and then he's not, incredible, well, it's fine. I can go to the waiver wire and pick up Gardner Minshew or Kirk Cousins. So I'm still a late-round quarterback believer, but almost because I do want to swing for the fences with those picks, knowing that the other options are there. And I know that doesn't directly apply for Bestball because I included a waiver wire element there, but I still think the same thing applies of like, we got to be trying to find this year's Lamar Jackson because we know what a huge swing he has on win rates.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Question 4. We've already established that you've taken a command and control of DFS Twitter, and recently it seems that you've set your sights on TikTok, and slowly you appear to be becoming a generational icon on yet another social media platform. So what inspired you to get in the TikTok game?
I dabbled a little bit on TikTok last fall, and I was kind of doing it as a bit, like I'll just become the premier fantasy football guy on TikTok, and then I forgot about it for a little while and came back to it. I just like it because it's a fun, adds another element to stuff you can do, just with the audio and the songs. And, a lot of stuff I do is comedic, so I'm basically doing little sketches and stuff, and they kind of provide templates and more to play with there. The thing that people don't realize, though, is my TikToks do well on Twitter, but I actually bomb on the TikTok platform. So I'm just using them as basically like a toolbox or tools for me to use, and then I take it over to Twitter because like my one video that got 350,000 views on Twitter, I think only got 400 views on TikTok. So it's a weird world out there.
Interesting. Dropping some gems for the content creators out there. Final question 5. Almost always in Bestball, you're going to be drafting your primary skill position players before you draft your first quarterback. So, how likely are you to target a specific quarterback with the purpose of pairing them with a pass catcher to, complete the stack? So, for example, if you draft Devontae Adams in the first round, would you consider taking Aaron Rodgers ahead of some of the other quarterbacks that you might like more than him, just for the reason of getting the upside that you have by having both of those guys from the same team on your roster?
Yeah, I think the way I normally think about it is we have seen in previous years some of these big draft best ball competitions where there's a ton of teams in there and a big prize up top, and you're really wanting to embrace variance and volatility and go out of your way and stack a quarterback with maybe even 2-3 pass catchers from the same team, just hoping you can catch that lightning in a bottle. But for just standard 12-team best ball leagues or even smaller than that, I kind of use the stacking as a tiebreaker. If I draft A.J. Brown and I'm looking at, Rivers and Tannehill, like I'm going to take Tannehill there as a tiebreaker, but I'm not going out of my way to reach on guys in just these 10 and 12 team leagues.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It definitely makes more sense, in my opinion, to stack in things like those tournaments that you're talking about where, maybe there's playoff weeks, so you really need to hit those end weeks really hard. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. I appreciate you indulging me with these 5 questions. And now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this show, the reason that people clicked on the video, the quarterback rankings. And we're going to start off by looking at the top 7 guys. So in order in how I have them ranked: Patrick Mahomes 1, Lamar Jackson 2, Dak Prescott 3, Kyler Murray 4, Russell Wilson 5, Deshaun Watson 6, and Josh Allen 7. Immediately, you'll notice that these are the same 7 guys in terms of positional ADP on drafters, just in a slightly different order. So does anything stand out to you about the order that I have them in versus the ADP? And is there anybody missing from this group?
Yeah, I know for good radio, arguing is always a useful thing, but I really do like how you have these rankings here. And I'll preface this by saying I don't do my own rankings. I like relying on people like Ben and other sharp people who put in the groundwork to actually do projections and make rankings and stuff. So anything I say, I'm just firing from the hip from my gut reactions. And I generally like to think about best ball drafts structurally. So a lot of times I'm not even focused as heavily on specific player evaluation and thinking of these guys in buckets. But that's kind of what you're highlighting here with these first 7 guys. I really do view those guys as a bucket. And one of the things that I think is the common theme across these quarterbacks is they all have rushing ability. And we know that's what separates the Josh Allen from the Matt Ryan and Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford and Wentz tier, is they are going to give you such a high floor with their rushing, and then on top of it, a big upside with rushing TDs, scrambling. We've seen Josh Allen pull it down and rip off some long runs. So would you say that that is kind of a theme you were taking into consideration with those top 7?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's obvious in any type of scoring format that's going to be 4 points per passing touchdown that these guys who have significant rushing upside are the guys that you're going to want to target. You know, they've got the higher ceiling in that scoring format, which is pretty much, you know, the standard scoring format across the business. So, yeah, you know, absolutely. It's no coincidence. Mahomes is the only one, I guess, who doesn't really fit into that category of this group. But you know, he's just such a prolific passer of the ball that, you know, it just trumps that, I think. But yeah, the other guys all have rushing equity. You know, Josh Allen, you mentioned, he averaged 570 yards and 8.5 touchdowns on the ground over the last 2 years. So while some people are, you know, trying to reconcile whether or not they can take a, you know, quote unquote below average passer as a top 10 fantasy quarterback, I'm going to be scooping up all the Allen shares that I can get.
Definitely, yeah. I Josh Allen is a guy I'm very excited about. It's been fascinating to watch his public perception shift from this guy that was just an awful NFL draft pick by the Bills. They reached for him. He wasn't, you know, particularly accurate in college. And now the way he's found this, you know, second career basically as a fantasy darling has been pretty fun to watch. And not even to mention, they added Stephon Diggs this offseason. Like, I would have been high on him regardless. And now they added a premier wide receiver weapon for him as well. I think he could easily be a top 5 quarterback this year.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And, you know, I live like an hour outside of Buffalo, so the Josh Allen talk is all I hear locally. So I'm very familiar with Allen and a lot of Allen truthers around my vicinity. How do you feel about Dak Prescott as my number 3 guy? That's the biggest difference in terms of my rankings versus the consensus. You know, he's my QB3. He's the ADP QB5 going around pick 51.5. You know, I absolutely love Dak Prescott. He was the QB2 last year, 3rd in points per game, and they have a ton of offensive congruity. And the changes that they did make, you know, I can only view them as pure upgrades. You know, exit 29-year-old Randall Cobb, enter 21-year-old CeeDee Lamb, whose player profiler comp is Jerry freaking Rice. You know, exit old man Witten, enter Blake Jarwin, who's, you know, a top 10 tight end in both yards per route ran and yards per target for tight ends last year. So for me, I know it's hard to replicate these standout seasons for quarterbacks, but I think that there's a ton of reasons to love Dak as the guy behind the consensus top 2.
Yeah, no, he would be my quarterback 3 as well. It's one of those things, too, where it's like, first of all, I don't think anyone can disagree they have the best 3 wide receiver set in football, now adding Lamb. So if we're going to view all of those weapons as individual special talents, like who is going to be the prime beneficiary of those? That's going to be Dak Prescott. And like you said, I think they've gotten rid of some of their more inefficient targets, you know, say little checkdowns to Witten, stuff underneath to Cobb. The thing that's difficult about Dallas is they came out at the beginning of the last season and they were just airing it out. And we all collectively got really excited. And then they kind of dialed it back. They started relying on Zeke a little bit more. So I think the big question mark and the only way this ranking goes wrong is if Dallas reverts back to this conservative run-first offense. But when you draft CeeDee Lamb in the first round, you are signaling to us, hey, it's all systems go. We're going to let Dak air it out. And I think you have to be drafting him aggressively here. And I did my first drafters draft. I drafted him as my quarterback in round 7, which I'm just stoked about, to kind of load up on my skill position players and then get a guy that we think can challenge, Lamar and Mahomes as the top quarterback. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, yep. I'm right there with you. I think that we can move on here to the next group of guys. We're going to look at 8 through 13 in my rankings, and actually let's make it 8 through 14. We've got Matt Ryan QB 8, Tom Brady QB 9, Matthew Stafford QB 10, Carson Wentz 11, Baker Mayfield 12, Aaron Rodgers 13, and finally Daniel Jones at 14. Now, I'll be completely honest, this is the group of quarterbacks that I have the hardest time making decisions on. A lot of the times, like you mentioned, I'll be using things like stacking to break the ties because, all these guys have a lot of upside, but it's hard to really, put your foot behind one guy and say, this is the guy that I think is going to make the leap into that tier above. So do you have any strong feelings about these guys and the ranking and the order that I have them ranked?
No, I agree with you in general with this being pretty flat. The way my brain looks is I'm trying to always look at this and be like, where is untapped upside in here, and where are guys perhaps being undervalued? The guy that jumps out to me is Daniel Jones. I think in a lot of ways he's very similar to Josh Allen, and you could argue he has better weapons than Josh Allen as well, and a similar rushing floor. And we saw it even like if you played DFS last year, there were multiple weeks where Daniel Jones was in the winning Millie Maker lineup, in just proving to us that he does have this upside, this ceiling that maybe someone like I'm trying to think of an example, Matt Ryan might not even necessarily have. The one guy that's probably overvalued to me in general is just Tom Brady, and I can see a path to that burning me. The thing that I keep coming back to with Brady is I do think the touchdown upside's going to be there. They're going to be in the red zone a lot. He's got great red zone weapons. We know he can, have some accurate throws there. I just worry about where the explosive plays are coming from. We saw that really hamper the Patriots last year, and I know his weapons are better, but Brady still isn't a guy that's uncorking these, 75-yard flicks like a Mahomes and Dak and Kyler and Russ Wilson can do. And I just worry that this is still going to be a primarily dink and dunk offense, and if you get vultured with a few rushing touchdowns when they get in the red zone, I think we could see some really low-scoring outputs from Brady. And he's the guy in this cohort that I'm probably never going to have because people are just going to be more excited than me about him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. One of the things that I think, is a plus for Brady is the lack of, proven run game that they have, whether it's Vaughn or Ronald Jones. I just don't know how much rushing is going to take away from, Brady's production, especially with the weapons that they have on that offense. But, we are talking about an old man at quarterback, and a lot of these guys are younger. Daniel Jones has the rushing upside, and all these other guys I think have a little bit more upside than Brady. So I do agree with you there. The one guy that I'm really interested in this tier is Baker Mayfield. He burned a lot of people last year. And, I don't know how much of the coaching was responsible for Baker's disappointing year. Baker fought really hard for Freddie Kitchens to get that job. I think people kind of forget that, after how they all fell out. But, now we're in the Kevin Stefanski era. The Browns have not said who is going to be calling plays for this offense yet. It'll either be Stefanski or their new OC, Alex Van Pelt. It'll be worked out during the preseason. They're going to experiment. So I think it's really hard to project, is this going to be a pass-heavy offense? Are they going to let Baker air it out to all these weapons that they've got, Odell, Jarvis, Austin Hooper, or is this going to be, the Chubb and Hunt show? So I think that Baker Mayfield definitely has the potential to finish a lot higher than QB 12 or where his ADP is, QB 15. But we saw last year the downside is equally present with a guy like Mayfield.
Yeah, and Mayfield is interesting too. You mentioned kind of the offensive philosophy that they're going to take. Last year they, really did feature Chubb, and then you have to ask yourself, was that because Mayfield was having a rough year and the offensive line wasn't that great, or is that just the identity of the football team? To me, a big tiebreaker here is Odell Beckham and really what happens with him, because we saw him just single-handedly make Eli Manning relevant as a quarterback for a couple years purely on his explosion, taking those slants, 70 yards to the house. And if Odell Beckham can get back to form, I think Baker can take that leap again, and even if it is in a run-first offense. But if Odell isn't there ripping off the big plays, then all of a sudden they're a little bit more of a dink-and-dunk offense. They bring in Austin Hooper. We know Jarvis Landry sucks up a lot of targets over the middle. Then I start to worry about the upside. So for me, the big riddle with Baker is, what Odell are we going to get?
Yep, that's a fair thing to wonder, and we'll get into Odell specifically when we talk wide receivers in a few episodes. And I think that you kind of have to have a correlated opinion on that. If you're going to be high on Odell this year, I think that should reflect in how you feel about Baker Mayfield and vice versa. I think that we should move on here to the next group of guys, QB 15 through QB 22. All right, so starting at 15, we've got Big Ben Roethlisberger. 16, I've got Jared Goff. 17, I've got Drew Brees, which is probably the biggest, difference in my rankings versus ADP. 18, Joe Burrow. Phillip Rivers, 19. Tannehill, 20. Jimmy G, 21. And then Kirk Cousins at 22. This tier is sort of filled with guys who are either older or, maybe just boring. Not the best weapons, but there's reasons to like them. So who really stands out to you in this tier? And I guess let's start with Drew Brees. I have him as my QB 17. He is the ADP QB 10. That ranking essentially means that I'm going to be fully fading him in my best ball portfolio. I'm not going to get him if that's how I feel about him. So do you think that I'm being a little bit too hard on Brees or not?
No, I like where you have him, and hell, I might even bump him down a little further. We've just seen how much his game has changed over the past 2 years. We know he has Michael Thomas, who's great, but again, Michael Thomas isn't one of those guys that's ripping off big yards after the catch plays. He's the guy underneath moving the chains. Brees does benefit from a lot of good red zone weapons. They also add Emmanuel Sanders this year. But to me, this is kind of the type of offense that we see with these older quarterbacks that are efficient, they're accurate, but they don't have the arm and the offenses don't have the tempo to really put up the monster scores. So to me, Drew Brees is the ultimate high floor guy. You also have the kind of historical splits with Brees not being as great on the road and outdoors. So that always gives me pause, especially as he gets up there in age. We know he even had I believe it was the thumb injury that hampered him a little bit last year. So I think there's just a lot of questions with them, and we know that they still love their ground game and like using that great offensive line to, quote unquote, establish the run. So yeah, Brees is a high floor guy, but I don't get too excited about him.
Yeah, there's also the Taysom Hill factor in terms of, him getting vultured. And, one thing that I think is kind of even going a little overlooked is that, Brees has already signed a deal with NBC to jump in the booth after he ends his time with the Saints. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion, I think, that this will be his last year. So when we're talking about a 41-year-old quarterback with limited weapons outside of, obviously, Michael Thomas, who's one of the best receivers, but outside of that, they've got Emmanuel Sanders, who's probably just as old as Brees or at least close to it. So, yeah, I'm not too excited about Brees. What about another guy? You mentioned Drew Brees' home road splits. What about Big Ben? Big Ben also has those same home road splits. He got hurt early last year, but if you look back at, the past 5 years, he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback in points per game from 2014 to 2018. He's going to be coming into a new situation. There's no more Mr. Big Chest there, but they've got Juju as a clear-cut number one guy. And I'm not really going to be holding anything against the Steelers' offense from what I saw with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. I think that if Big Ben is healthy, if he can deliver on the hype that haircut video is circulating into the Twitter sphere, then, Big Ben has a decent chance to outperform this QB 15 ranking and his QB 19 ADP.
Yeah, I think he probably is undervalued just based on the things you described. It's, just we're humans, when he's out of sight, out of mind for a while, we're naturally going to discount him. Whereas I think most everyone would agree, if we're getting the Ben Roethlisberger that we got 2 seasons ago, he's a definite top 12 quarterback. I think the big questions are obviously he's getting up there in age. He doesn't have mobility. If the arm strength is still there and the offensive philosophy to really push the ball down the field, and we know they have the weapons to do that, Everyone's very excited about Deontay Johnson, James Washington. They add Chase Claypool, and then you add Ebron too in the mix as a big red zone presence. He definitely has the weapons. I'm also just curious though if the team is kind of wanting to transition more to a run-first game. They draft Anthony McFarland. They seem to like Connor and Benny Snell as well. So to me, I guess the Roethlisberger, the two question marks is like, where's his just physical ability at right now? And also, is the team philosophy still going to let, Big Ben run the show, call the shots, audible out of run plays, and really move the chains through the air? That's kind of what I'm wrestling with Big Ben.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And the last name that I really want to hit on in this tier is Phillip Rivers. We're talking about all these old guys right now, but look, I don't think that there is a worse ADP across any position than Phillip Rivers going as the quarterback 26. Over the last 7 seasons, he's been a top 12 guy out of 5 of those 7 years. And he hasn't finished lower than QB 15 since 2012. I get it. He's not the flashy guy, but QB 26 is just an egregious ADP for this guy. And the Colts offensive line is probably one of, if not the best offensive line he's ever played behind. T.Y. Hilton coming back healthy, a pair of young second-round wide receivers in Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman. Jack Doyle's still there. They might even be able to get something out of Trey Burton. So, I don't understand the Phillip Rivers ADP. Jameis Winston is going ahead of him. Maybe that's, courtesy of auto draft or something. But yeah, if Phillip Rivers is going to be going this late, he is going to be my most owned quarterback when things are all said and done.
Yeah, and I think Rivers falls into similar buckets as Roethlisberger and Breeze, just a very high floor. I think the thing you worry about again is, okay, they draft Jonathan Taylor. They have this great offensive line. Are they really willing to let Rivers air it out, or do they want to, keep the ball on the ground? The biggest riddle for me with Rivers, too, is he's been so good over the years at checking down to his pass-catching running backs. And the Colts have, for whatever reason, never used Marlon Mack like that. People are wondering if they're going to use Jonathan Taylor. They have Nyheim Hines there, too. So I'm just curious what kind of offense they're going to run. I think, in general, I personally am going to want to take a guy like Tannehill over Rivers and just bank that Tannehill's hyper efficiency can expand with some more volume. But yeah, Rivers to me has a safe floor. I think he's probably a great bet to outproduce his ADP, but maybe not the best bet to wildly outproduce it. So that's kind of what you're wrestling with there. But to me, Rivers is the kind of guy you can draft based on the type of other quarterbacks you already took. If you took some more volatile guys like Josh Allen and Daniel Jones, maybe you come back with Phillip Rivers as your third QB knowing he has such a high floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing about guys like Rivers and maybe Jimmy Garoppolo, guys in that range, is like if you are going to go for the stack, you can get their number one options at a really affordable price. T.Y. Hilton isn't going until the 5th or 6th round, so you can get that stack at a really low price, both the quarterback and the wide receiver, and that's something that I like to look at as well. Let's move on here to our second to last tier. This is sort of like the tier of unproven upside guys from 23 to 27. We've got Gardner Minshew for me at 23, Sam Darnold 24, Derek Carr 25, Drew Lock 26, and Teddy Bridgewater at 27. Are any of these guys too low for you? Should they be in the tier above, or does this sort of seem right as like the guy that you want to pick one of to take a shot on?
Yeah, I like this tier a lot. There's a couple guys that get me excited here as far as, untapped potential or maybe not fully factored into the market. Minshew is a guy that I just really like, and I think he has some great weapons with DJ Chark, and I'm personally just super high on Laviska Shenault. I think he's a really nice pairing there. And we saw last year they wasted so many targets on checkdowns to Fournette. I believe he had 100 targets last year. So I'm excited about this offense. They also bring in Eifert to give him another big body in the red zone. And the identity that I always felt the Jags really wanted to be was an up-tempo passing offense. And I think Minshew has the tools to do that. So he's definitely a third quarterback I love taking. And same with Drew Lock. To me, Drew Lock is a guy that could take that Daniel Jones, Josh Allen leap where it's like, yeah, he's not the most accurate or exciting quarterback, but He's young, he can run, and then look at these weapons they surrounded him with. It seems like he could play average and really still outperform that draft slot just solely based on how dynamic the weapons are.
Yeah, exciting stuff. I think we have our first major disagreement to go over, and that's the Drew Lock take. I'm absolutely right there with Minshew. He is my top guy in this tier. I love what he can do. He was 18th in points per game last year, as a rookie, ahead of guys like Mayfield, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, like all of these guys. Minshew, came out hot, and I think that he is only going to get better. But Drew Lock, look, there's no denying the weapons. Denver did everything right in terms of surrounding him with strong supporting cast. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, all of these are really good reasons to like Lock. But I think that one of the things that is really overblowing the way the public's looking at him is just one of the all-time worst stats, which is QB wins. The Broncos won 4 out of their 5 final games with Lock under center. But, during that span, he was averaging barely over 200 yards passing per game and 1.4 touchdowns per game in that span. He had less fantasy points per game than Jeff Driscoll and Eli Manning. I think that there is a very legit chance that he is not good, and within the next 2 years, we're going to see the Broncos pull some kind of move to get, Aaron Rodgers or something like that, the same way they did with, Peyton Manning. I don't personally view Drew Lock as the future in Denver, and I think that is going to become very evident throughout this year.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think we both could be right. We've seen, quarterbacks like Winston be very bad in a real football sense, taking on unnecessary risk, lots of picks, and yet because of the aggressiveness, because of the tempo, and because of the weapons, that they're extremely fantasy viable and find themselves in a lot of negative game scripts. I think my biggest concern with Locke would be if Denver really doubles down on the run with Lindsey and Gordon, who are 2 great running backs. But if they are in a lot of negative game scripts and allowing Locke to just chuck it around the yard, I think he could be that, that rare Winston-esque unicorn where he's bad in real life but great for fantasy.
Yeah, you know what? That does seem like a legit possibility. Let's move on to our final tier here, 28 through 32. And, this really comes with a question. So 28, Nick Foles. 29, Dwayne Haskins. 30, Jarrett Stidham. 31, Justin Herbert. And 32, Tyrod Taylor. So, the question that you have to ask yourself if you're drafting any of these guys is, how do you handle a quarterback in best ball that's unlikely to start all 16 games, but they might be productive in those starts that they do have? Foles, if he has, command of that Bears offense with all the weapons they have, I think he's going to put up good fantasy games. Same thing with Tyrod Taylor, but it's only a matter of time until he gets replaced by Herbert at some point this year. So, how do you value the chance to have fewer good weeks enter your best ball lineup versus having, one of these guys like maybe Teddy Bridgewater or Derek Carr, where you're going to have the chance to get him in your lineup throughout the entire year, but, the highs are not going to be quite as high.
Yeah, I think in general, I am trying to avoid drafting one of these guys. Obviously, they're hopefully your third quarterback if you are drafting them. I personally am going to try to grab a quarterback from that other tier we just discussed as my third quarterback. Because like you said, there's a chance that you're burning a pick here. And it's not like they're a handcuff running back where if things break right, they can finish, have these top 10 weeks for you. If things break right and Nick Foles, say, starts and plays the whole season, he doesn't have that, upside to crack into the top 10 most weeks. Sure, he might do it in a stray week, but I don't think that's what you can expect, even if he does start the full season. I guess out of these guys, if I were to target one, it would probably be Dwayne Haskins. And I know everyone who watched the tape said he just looked horrendous last year. But you look at how Terry McLaurin finished the season with him those last 3 games. I believe he had like a touchdown or 75 yards in all 3 of those. Obviously has the shower narrative with him going back there. And I don't think the weapons are too bad. And one of the things we're trying to do is like, what are inefficiencies in the market? We know quarterbacks can take a leap from year 1 to year 2. And Dwayne Haskins, to me, might be a guy that has some upside that's not accounted for in his price. So he's probably the guy I'd take a flyer on as my third QB. But yeah, I think I want to avoid this range. I don't want to guess on when Herbert and Taylor is going to play. I know you don't have Fitzpatrick ranked here for a similar reason. You don't want to guess when Tua is going to come play. I guess of all of these, Foles is probably the safest, and Haskins is the guy I'm probably taking a swing at.
Yeah, it's unfortunate with this Chargers situation because they have one of the most loaded offenses in terms of pass catching talent. So it would be nice to be able to, look at these two guys. But, I mean, could you really set either of their over-unders for more than 8 games started? I think that's, it's just really shaky there. I do like Nick Foles. He's my top guy in this tier. I think that Trubisky's time is over. It's pretty much written in stone. He wasted his chance, and I think that Nick Foles is going to start more games than people think. And Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, and Tariq Cohen, I think that there's a lot to like about the Bears if they do bounce back moving on from Trubisky. So I am willing to take a shot on Foles, but really exclusively only as a quarterback 3, like you mentioned. If you're relying on any of these guys for quarterback 2, I think you're going to have a tough year.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to mention here?
No, I think my big kind of macro level thing that I think can really help you out is drafting 3 quarterbacks because we know the production is relatively flat. It's just a really good way to ensure you have a high floor at that position. I liked our discussion on stacking. I think you can definitely look for that. And then to me, I think you really need to find these guys that do have the upside to finish top 5 and deliver a win rate that is really high above expectation, because that's what swing it. When you look at win rates last year for teams that had Lamar Jackson, it's insane. And sure, we might not get another Lamar Jackson. Actually, we probably won't get another Lamar Jackson this year. But to me, I'm generally going to be fading the high floor guys, and that's why I'm so willing to chase Daniel Jones, chase Ryan Tannehill, chase Minshew, chase Drew Lock, guys that have more unknowns, but I think have the ingredients to make a big leap.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that if you looked at the win rates from 2 years ago, you'd see the same thing about Mahomes. He wasn't going that highly, but then the people who did get him, who did take that shot on the upside guy, saw huge dividends on that. Real quick, we can end the show in a second here, but we didn't talk about Joe Burrow at all. Do you think that he is one of those guys, or is it just going to be too hard for him to come in as a rookie? Because, frankly, that Bengals offense is really loaded with talent.
Yeah, I think I would be more excited about Burrow if I thought he would run more. I'm worried he is going to be more of a pocket passer, and so when you combine that with the year 1, learning curve, I just worry about his floor. But I could definitely see it with the weapons. If he immediately has a connection with those guys, he is stacked enough to put up some big touchdowns. But again, I think as a rookie, he doesn't run. They still love Joe Mixon. That's going to be part of their identity. So he's an interesting case because he is a bit of an unknown, a black box, and so theoretically that could pay off. But I just worry about his rushing upside really kind of capping him.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And you know what? I think that is all we've got for this quarterback rankings debate. We will be back in a few days with episode 2 of this 4-part series where we will be taking a look at the running back position. So if you liked what you saw, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, leave a comment if you have any feedback on how to improve the show. We're definitely interested in that. And if you are somehow one of those sad souls who has yet to follow Peter on Twitter, make sure you do. You can find him at Peter Overzet. You can find me on Twitter at Ben Hauver, and that is it. We will talk to you guys soon. Thank you for watching.